Imagine a country so poor that its people ate bread made from tree bark mixed with straw. A nation where life expectancy barely reached 40 years, where darkness and despair seemed eternal. Now, picture that same country, just one generation later, becoming one of the most educated, prosperous, and happiest nations on Earth. This isn't fiction. This is a true story of Finland, and today we're diving into one of the most remarkable transformations in human history, as captured in Grigory Petrov's masterpiece, In the Land of White Lilies. But here's what will blow your mind. They did it without oil, without gold, without any natural advantage except one thing. And when you hear what that one thing was, it will completely change how you think about success, both for nations and for yourself. Stay with me, because by the end of this podcast, you'll understand why this book, written over a century ago, holds a secret that every struggling nation and individual needs to hear today. Welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most inspiring books you probably never heard of, In the Land of White Lilies, or Beyaz Zambaklar Ülkesinde in Turkish, written by Russian author Grigory Petrov in 1923. This isn't just another history book. It's a blueprint for transformation that has inspired millions, particularly in Turkey, where it became a phenomenon, selling over 1 million copies and influencing generations of leaders and thinkers. Petrov visited Finland in the early 1900s and witnessed something extraordinary, a nation pulling itself from the depth of poverty to the heights of civilization, not through conquest or exploitation, but through something far more powerful, education and character building. Let me paint you a picture of where the story begins. In the mid-1800s, Finland was arguably one of the most miserable places in Europe, under Russian rule since 1809, having been passed between Swedish and Russian empires like a forgotten possession. The Finnish people lived in conditions that would shock modern sensibilities. The statistics are staggering. In 1867 to 1868, a devastating famine killed approximately 15% of the entire population. Imagine 1 in 7 people dying of hunger. Those who survived often resorted to eating pedu, bread made from the inner bark of pine trees mixed with whatever little grain they could find. Alcoholism was rampant, with some regions reporting that the average adult consumed over 40 liters of pure alcohol per year. Illiteracy rates exceeded 90% in rural areas. Violence was commonplace, and the murder rate was among the highest in Europe. But Petrov's book doesn't dwell on this darkness for the sake of drama. Instead, he uses it to set up one of history's most important questions. How did a nation go from this to becoming a model society in just 50 years? The transformation began with one man whom most people have never heard of, Johann Wilhelm Snellman. A philosopher, journalist, and statesman, Snellman understood something that escapes many leaders even today. Real power doesn't come from armies or resources, but from the minds and hearts of people. Snellman's philosophy was revolutionary for its time. He believed that a nation's true wealth lay not in its natural resources, but in its human capital. Every citizen, he argued, carries within him potential to lift the entire nation. But potential without cultivation is meaningless, like seeds without soil or water. Here's where the story gets interesting. Snellman didn't just theorize, he acted. He began writing in Finnish, not Swedish, which was a language of the educated elite, publishing newspapers and books that common people could read. He fought for Finnish to be recognized as an official language, understanding that people think best in their mother tongue. But his masterstroke was convincing others that education wasn't a luxury for the elite, but a necessity for everyone. What happened next in Finland should be studied in every school of public policy. The Finns didn't just build schools, they reimagined what education meant. By 1880, Finland had established a comprehensive primary education system that was both free and compulsory. But here's the crucial difference from other nations' approaches. Finnish education wasn't about creating obedient workers or nationalist soldiers. It was about creating thinking, capable, moral human beings. Petrov describes visiting Finnish schools and being amazed by what he saw. Children weren't just memorizing facts. They were learning practical skills. Boys learned carpentry, metalwork, and agriculture alongside mathematics and literature. Girls, and this was revolutionary for the time, received the same academic education as boys, plus practical skills like nutrition and household management. Everyone learned music, art, and most importantly, critical thinking. But the real genius was in how they taught. Finnish educators understood something that modern neuroscience has only recently confirmed. People learn best when they see immediate practical application. A geometry lesson might involve designing a barn. A chemistry class might focus on improving soil fertility. Literature wasn't just about reading classics, but about writing letters, contracts, and newspapers. The teachers themselves were different too. In Finland, teaching became one of the most respected professions. Teachers were well-paid, well-trained, and given significant autonomy. They weren't just instructors. They were nation builders, and everyone knew it. But Petrov's book reveals something even more profound than the education revolution: the character transformation of the Finnish people. This is where In the Land of White Lilies becomes more than just a historical account. It becomes a manual for human development. The Finns developed what they called Sisu, a concept that doesn't translate perfectly into English, but encompasses determination, resilience, and quiet strength. But Sisu wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about maintaining dignity and purpose through that hardship. Petrov tells story after story that illustrates this transformation. He describes visiting a Finnish home where the family had only black bread and milk for dinner, yet the table was set with clean cloth, wildflowers in a vase, and everyone dressed in their clean, mended clothes. Poverty hadn't destroyed their dignity. He tells of workers who formed study circles, meeting after 12-hour workdays to read and discuss literature, science, and philosophy. One particularly moving account describes a group of Finnish farmers who pooled their meager resources to buy a library for their village. When asked why they would spend money on books when they barely had enough for food, one farmer replied, "A man could survive on little food, but he cannot truly live without feeding his mind." This wasn't just individual transformation. It was collective. The Finns developed a strong culture of civic responsibility. Corruption, which had been endemic, became socially unacceptable. People began taking pride not in individual wealth, but in collective achievement. They formed cooperatives, mutual aid societies, and cultural organizations. Every village, no matter how small, had its choir, its theater group, its study circle. One of the most remarkable aspects of Finland's transformation, which Petrov documents extensively, was the role of women. Finland became the first European country to grant women full political rights in 1906, but this was a sudden decision. It was a culmination of decades of recognizing women's crucial role in national development. Finnish women weren't just educated. They were educated to be educators. Mothers became the first teachers of a nation, creating home environments where learning was valued and curiosity encouraged. Women's organizations became powerful forces for social reform, tackling alcoholism, poverty, and illiteracy with systematic, organized campaigns. Petrov describes meeting Finnish women who ran schools, managed cooperatives, and led social reform movements. He was particularly impressed by the Finnish approach to motherhood. It wasn't seen as a limitation on women's potential, but as a crucial national service that deserved support and respect. Finland pioneered maternal support systems, understanding that investing in mothers was investing in the future. Part 6, the economic miracle. Now here's where skeptics might say, sure, education and character are nice, but what about the economy? This is where Finland's story becomes truly remarkable. Without significant natural resources, this was before they developed their forest industry, without colonies to exploit, without vast agricultural lands, Finland built a thriving economy based on human capital. The educated workforce didn't just work harder, they worked smarter. Finnish farmers, educated in agricultural science, increased crop yields dramatically. Finnish workers, trained in technical skills, produced goods that could compete in international markets. Finnish entrepreneurs, educated in commerce and languages, built trading networks across Europe. But the real economic revolution came from innovation. An educated population doesn't just follow instructions, it solves problems. Finnish engineers developed new techniques for paper production that revolutionized the industry. Finnish designers created products that combined functionality with beauty, laying the groundwork for what would later become famous as Scandinavian design. The cooperatives deserve special mention. By 1920, Finland had one of the most developed cooperative movements in the world. Farmers' cooperatives controlled much of agricultural production and distribution. Workers' cooperatives provided affordable goods and services. Credit cooperatives provided capital for small businesses. This wasn't socialism imposed from above. It was democratic capitalism built from below. Petrov dedicates significant portions of his book to Finland's cultural transformation, and for good reason. A nation's culture is its soul, and Finland's soul was reborn during this period. The Finnish language, once dismissed as a peasant tongue, became a vehicle for world-class literature. The Kalevala, Finland's national epic, compiled from ancient oral traditions, became a source of national pride and artistic inspiration. Writers like Aleksis Kivi created works that spoke to both Finnish identity and universal human themes. Music flourished. Jean Sibelius, Finland's most famous composer, created symphonies that captured both the Finnish landscape and spirit. But it wasn't just high culture. Every village had its choir, every school its orchestra. Music became a form of national expression and unity. Architecture evolved to reflect Finnish values: simplicity, functionality, and harmony with nature. Finnish architects pioneered designs that maximize light during dark winters, that use local materials creatively, and that created spaces for community gathering. This cultural renaissance wasn't separate from economic and social development. It was integral to it. A people who see themselves reflected in art, literature, and music develop confidence. A nation that values creativity alongside productivity creates citizens who can adapt and innovate. Petrov's book was written just after Finland gained independence in 1917, but the story doesn't end there. The real test of Finland's transformation came in the following decades. Would this small nation, built on education and character rather than military might, survive in a world of power politics? The Winter War of 1939 to 1940 provided the answer. When the Soviet Union, with its massive military superiority, invaded Finland, the world expected a quick conquest. Instead, the Finns held out for 105 days, inflicting devastating casualties on the invaders. This wasn't just military prowess. It was a result of an educated, unified population that could organize, innovate, and persist against overwhelming odds. But even more impressive than military resistance was what happened after. Finland had to cede territory and pay massive reparations to the Soviet Union. A lesser nation might have collapsed. Finland used it as an opportunity. The reparations, which had to be paid in industrial goods, forced Finland to rapidly industrialize. The educated workforce adapted, retrained, and built new industries. By the 1960s, Finland had not just recovered, but had become one of Europe's most prosperous nations. So, what can we learn from Finland's story? Why does a book written a century ago matter today? The lessons are more relevant than ever. First, the supremacy of human capital. In our age of artificial intelligence and automation, many worry about human obsolescence. Finland's story reminds us that educated, creative, ethical human beings remain the ultimate resource. No amount of technology can replace human judgment, creativity, and moral reasoning. Second, the importance of inclusive development. Finland didn't succeed by creating a small elite and hoping wealth would trickle down. They succeeded by developing everyone, men and women, rural and urban, rich and poor. In our age of increasing inequality, this lesson is crucial. Third, the power of cultural confidence. Finland didn't develop by copying other nations wholesale. They learned from others but adapted everything to their own context and values. In our globalized world, maintaining cultural identity while remaining open to new ideas is more important than ever. Fourth, the long-term perspective. Finland's transformation took generations. In our age of instant gratification, Finland reminds us that real, lasting change requires patience and persistence. You can't download development like an app. Fifth, the integration of material and spiritual development. Finland didn't just get richer. It developed a society where people could find meaning and purpose. In our age of material abundance but spiritual poverty, this balance is especially relevant. To be fair and balanced, we must acknowledge that Petrov's account, while inspiring, has been criticized for oversimplification. Finland's development wasn't quite as smooth or dramatic as the book sometimes suggests. There were setbacks, conflicts, and ongoing problems that Petrov glosses over. Some historians argue that Petrov, writing for a Russian audience in the aftermath of the revolution, was using Finland as an idealized example to make political points about Russia's own development. His emphasis on education and character, while important, may understate other factors like Finland's strategic geographic position, its relatively homogeneous population, and favorable international circumstances. Moreover, Finland's model, while successful, may not be directly transferable to larger, more diverse nations. What works for a country of 5 million relatively similar people may not work for nations with hundreds of millions and deep cultural divisions. These criticisms are valid and important, but they don't negate the fundamental truths Petrov identified, that human development is the foundation of all other development, that education is a great equalizer, and that national transformation is possible even under most adverse circumstances. It's fascinating that this book became such a phenomenon in Turkey. When Petrov's book was translated into Turkish, it struck a deep chord. Turkey, like Finland, was a nation trying to modernize and develop while maintaining its identity. The story of Finland's transformation from a poor, peripheral nation to a developed, respected one resonated with Turkish aspirations. Turkish educators, politicians, and intellectuals saw in Finland's story a roadmap for their own development. The emphasis on education particularly resonated. Turkey embarked on massive education reforms partly inspired by the Finnish example. The idea that a nation could develop through its own efforts without becoming a copy of Western powers was especially appealing. Many Turkish readers report that the book changed their lives, inspiring them to pursue education, to contribute to their nation's development, and to believe in the possibility of transformation. The book became required reading in many Turkish schools and continues to be reprinted and discussed. While Petrov's book is about national transformation, its lessons apply equally to personal development. The Finnish model suggests several principles for individual growth. Invest in yourself through continuous learning. The Finnish farmers who bought books instead of extra food understood that mental development is as important as physical survival. In our careers and personal lives, the commitment to continuous learning pays the highest dividends. Develop character alongside competence. The Finns understood that skills without ethics lead to corruption and social decay. In our personal lives, developing integrity, resilience, and purpose is as important as developing professional skills. Think long-term. Finnish parents sacrificed so their children could attend school, knowing they wouldn't see the benefits in their lifetime. In our personal lives, the ability to delay gratification and invest in long-term growth separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Contribute to something larger than yourself. Finnish individuals found meaning in contributing to national development. We too find our greatest satisfaction not in individual achievement, but in contributing to our families, communities, and causes we believe in. Maintain dignity regardless of circumstances. The Finnish family that set their meager table with flowers reminds us that poverty of resources doesn't require poverty of spirit. Whatever our circumstances, we can maintain our dignity and standards. The title, In the Land of White Lilies, is deeply symbolic. The white lily represents purity, rebirth, and hope. For Petrov, Finland was a land where these qualities flourished despite harsh conditions, like lilies blooming in difficult soil. But the metaphor goes deeper. Lilies grow from bulbs buried in dark earth, invisible for months before suddenly bursting into bloom. Finland's transformation was like this. Decades of patient cultivation and education and character development, often invisible, before suddenly blossoming into visible prosperity and progress. The message for us is clear. Transformation, whether national or personal, begins long before it becomes visible. The seeds we plant today in education, character development, and community building may not bloom immediately, but with patience, persistence, and faith in human potential, even the most barren ground can become a land of white lilies. As we face our own challenges, inequality, climate change, technological disruption, social division, Finland's story reminds us that transformation is possible, not through magic or luck, but through the patient, persistent development of human potential, not through conquering others, but through conquering our own limitations, not through exploiting resources, but through cultivating minds and characters. Grigory Petrov concluded his book with a challenge that remains relevant today. Every nation has within it the seeds of greatness. The question is whether we'll choose to water them with education and character, or let them wither in ignorance and corruption. Finland chose to water those seeds, and the results speak for themselves. Today, Finland consistently ranks among the world's happiest, most educated, least corrupt, and most innovative nations. The land that once survived on tree bark now leads the world in education, technology, and quality of life. But Finland's story isn't finished, and neither is ours. Every generation faces the same choice: invest in human development or accept decline. Choose character or choose corruption. Build for the future or consume the present. The land of white lilies isn't a place. It's a possibility. A possibility that exists wherever people choose education over ignorance, cooperation over conflict, and hope over despair. The question Petrov's book leaves us with is simple but profound. Will we choose to create our own land of white lilies? Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most inspiring transformations. If this story resonated with you, I encourage you to read Petrov's book yourself, to share these ideas with others, and most importantly, to apply these lessons in your own life and community. Remember, transformation begins with a single person choosing to learn, to grow, and to contribute. That person could be you. That time could be now. The land of white lilies awaits. But before you go, I want to leave you with 3 questions that might just change your life. First, if Finland could transform from eating tree bark to leading the world in education in just 50 years, what's your excuse? What's really stopping you or your community from dramatic transformation? Second, what would happen if you applied the Finnish formula to your own life for just 1 year? What if you invested in learning something new every day, developed your character with the same intensity you develop your career, and contributed to your community with the same passion you pursue your personal goals? And here's the big one, the question that keeps me up at night. In a world where artificial intelligence can process information faster than any human, where robots can work longer than any person, what is it that makes humans irreplaceable? The Finnish story suggests it's not our ability to memorize or compute, but our capacity to create, to care, and to build character. Do you agree? Or is there something else? If this story of transformation inspired you, if you believe that education and character can still change the world, then you're exactly the kind of person I want in this community. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not just to support the channel, but to join a movement of people who believe in human potential. And here's my challenge to you. Don't just subscribe. Engage. Share in the comments which lesson from Finland's story resonated most with you. Tell us about transformations you've witnessed or experienced. Let's build our own land of white lilies right here in this community. Ring that notification bell, because next week, we're diving into another game-changing book that reveals how ordinary people have created extraordinary changes. You won't want to miss it. And if you found value in today's podcast, if you learned something that might change how you approach tomorrow, then please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Maybe it's a student feeling hopeless about their future. Maybe it's a teacher who's lost faith in education's power. Maybe it's a leader searching for a different path forward. Remember, Finland's transformation started with one person sharing an idea with another. Your share could be the spark that ignites someone else's transformation. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing that the best transformations are still ahead of us. This is your channel name, and you've been listening to stories that change lives. The land of white lilies isn't just Finland's story. It's waiting to become yours. Subscribe now, and let's write that story together.